YouTube Ozzico, and the Goat House is back just after the Senior Bowl here with my biggest winners and losers of the week. The practice through the games, all of it matters. Mainly going to focus on risers, but we're going to talk about a ton of prospects, where they can go in the draft now, maybe what teams they can go to. Excited about our draft content and our offseason content in general, covering free agency. We have a bunch of that content already out, more rolling out. So join us, like, subscribe, turn notifications on, help us get 100K. We're almost there. Really appreciate the support. Very important to follow us on Twitter as well. Links pinned in the comments for anything you're looking for. Maybe the biggest name of the week, Darius Robinson. A lot of buzz. He wasn't talked about a ton before the Senior Bowl. I think the media was pretty low on him because going into the Senior Bowl, all the scouts, the coaches, the executives, they had their eyes on him. So he's more of a riser. And he's a riser because of what he did at practice, but because of the media starting to realize who he is now. But he was kind of already on the radar of people within the league before. But I like his versatility a lot. He's going to be a defensive end. Whether it's a 3-4 scheme, he's going to play 3-4 end, or a 4-3 scheme, he'll play 4-3 end. But it's a guy you can move around a bit. Could he play 3 technique? Really, could he stand up and rush off the edge as well? I couldn't put it past him. A freaky dude. The one-on-ones were fun. He can win with speed. He can win with power. You just don't see, he has the weight of like an old school pass rusher that has experience playing over the tackle and inside, but he has the athleticism of today's style pass rusher as well. Has that explosiveness, that get off, that twitch. But certain schemes he may not be an edge rusher too. But to me, he fits any scheme. So I love that about him. He's definitely a force. He showed at the Senior Bowl. He wasn't talked about a ton before, but it felt like a top 50 pick. Maybe I call him a top 32 lock. I think he's going to go much earlier than around top 32 either. And some teams that make sense. I mean, you can put a long list of teams for a lot of these guys on this video, but especially him, because like I said, if he's going to go to a 3-4, he's going to play 3-4 end. He's not going to be stuck in that spot, though. He's going to move around. If he goes to a 4-3 team, he's going to play 4-3 end. He's not going to be stuck in that spot. Play 3 technique as well. So he fits a long list of teams. Saints like their, physical, freaky defensive end, and they can use him at 3 technique as well. The Texans, he could be for D'Amico Ryans, maybe like an Ark Armstead, how he, for what he was for him in San Francisco. So teams like that, the Ravens probably use him as both 3-4 end and an outside linebacker. Same with the Vikings. Chiefs like their physical defensive ends, and they're 4-3. And then, yeah, Gus Bradley's defense that he can work out as well at the Colts. So those are some interesting landing spots in the first round, but there could be much more teams. I want to pick out. I always do 6 for some reason in this video. But that is a huge name, freaky, versatile dude that can do so many different things. And it's it's a type of guy. It's kind of rare in today's game, like his size and what he's able to do. So that's a big one to watch out for. Quite a few offensive linemen. We know it's a good offensive line class. And Taliese Fuaga from Oregon State, he was starting to get some buzz. I mean, during the season, but leading up to the Senior Bowl, it really picked up. Like, could he actually go top 20? Before it was like, yeah, he'll go top 32 probably. First round pick. But where will he go, mid to late? And then right before the Senior Bowl, it started to be like, all right, mid or kind of pushing early. So goes from a top 18 pick, in my opinion, to a top 13 pick, which at first glance doesn't seem like a major difference. But in the first round, it really is. Because if you're picking around, like the Bengals pick at 18, do they have to move up to get him? But maybe they would have to move up. Or the Patriots, maybe if they're a trade back, they can get him. The Giants, maybe a trade back. They might think they're set at tackle. But I look at the Titans, maybe be a little earlier than what people are talking about right now. But people maybe start to talk about it a little bit more after the Senior Bowl. The sweet spot there is the Jets and the Raiders, teams that could be looking for a tackle. Had a fantastic season for Oregon State. Obviously, they had a really solid tackle duo, but he was a monster in one-on-ones and throughout the week during practice. So really stood out. And again, the stock was rising going into the Senior Bowl, and it's even more so after. Another offensive tackle, Tyler Guyton, who was starting to get a little bit of buzz right before the Senior Bowl. Like, he kind of was known as a second-round guy right before the Senior Bowl. Like, could he sneak into the first round because what he's about to show in the Senior Bowl and his athleticism, combined with the size. But it kind of felt like a top 40 pick. I do think he goes in the first round now. Maybe a top 24 pick makes some sense. And you see some similar teams that could use a tackle. Could he go as early as the Raiders up in the early portion of the first round? I think it's possible because he's solid. He looked really good at Senior Bowl practices, and he has the traits you look for in today's game: the athleticism, the length. So it's one of those. Just with that is one of in the experience. Just with that, he's kind of one of those guys that everyone wants to work with. But the fact that usually those guys don't have the best play under their belt quite yet. His teammate last year who went to the Chiefs, Wanya Morris, didn't really have the best tape yet, but you can see the upside. This guy already has that tape, so it feels like a lock to be a first-round pick. Right around that Bengals range, of the first round, makes a ton of sense to me. So some of these tackles look really good. We knew that before the Senior Bowl, but even more so after. Tomorrow, not a tackle, but interior offensive lineman, the center from Oregon, which based on the one-on-ones and the drills we saw at the Senior Bowl practices, looks like he could play guard. I mean, he had some smooth, quick, powerful reps. Like you can make a highlight tape out of Jackson Powers Johnson just in drills at the Senior Bowl practices. So felt like a top 40 pick. Some people were talking about him as the best interior offensive lineman already, but do you take a center in the first round? That's kind of the question. But now, you feel like he goes in the top 30. To get specific, could just say top 32. But, Eagles replace Kelsey. Will they put Juergens back at center? Will he play guard? The Bills looking for a Mitch Morse future replacement. But again, I think Powers Johnson could play guard. The Dolphins could use a center or guard. The Cowboys, Biag's going to be a free agent. Ravens, they have Linderbaum at center. Obviously, they weren't afraid to take him early, but could they put a guy like this at guard? I can see it. The Bucs, same thing, center or guard for them. So a lot of good fits there, and we know how the Eagles will value. I think these teams will value that position, whether it's center or guard again. But he was a stud at these practices, in these drills, and showing that maybe he could be versatile as well. So look for him to be a first-round pick. Some of these offensive linemen. And then Quinyon Mitchell, who was starting to get some buzz just before the Senior Bowl because he had a really good tape. He's a big-time playmaker. He knows how to read a quarterback. He knows how to step in front of the ball, step in front of the receiver, make a play, and he can take it back for 6 too. Just the problem is he played the weaker competition playing in the MAC at Toledo. But it felt like a top 5 corner, and that was even debatable. Maybe somebody had it because there's so many good corners. Maybe somebody had him top 6, top 7, but most people had him top 5, maybe around that 4 or 5 range. After the Senior Bowl, it feels like he could be a top 2 guy. Like you got Terrion Arnold at 1, and it could be Mitchell at 2. I know Kool-Aid McKinstry has a lot of experience, a lot of good play. Wiggins is a playmaker. There's a couple other guys, but Mitchell's a big-time playmaker, but sticky in coverage, showed his physicality off, in practice. I mean, people were saying this was the best player at – it is debatable because people were saying it about Robinson as well, but I think I heard the most praise about Powers, Johnson, Mitchell, and maybe Robinson. Mitchell, if I had to pick one who I heard the most good things about, it'd probably be Mitchell. Like people saying that's the best player, the best defensive player there. So it's a legit playmaking corner that it's good to see. That's kind of the question. Like some people would say, is he just like a playmaker? Is it like a hit or miss type play? I don't know if too many people were saying that. But then people were also you're saying, competition, level of competition, a lot different than because we're comparing them with the Alabama duo. We're comparing them with a Clemson corner. We're comparing them with an Iowa corner. And then going to the Senior Bowl, like sometimes the smaller school guys, like, okay, they weren't ready to go one-on-one with the big school guys at the Senior Bowl, and he thrived. So that is huge. One-on-ones really are harder than game scenarios, in my opinion. So that was massive for him. So he could be the second corner taken off the board. And the Vikings pick 11. They're up around that range. He can go as early as there. The Broncos are around there. The Colts aren't too far later. And the Steelers would like him a lot. If he somehow slipped through towards the end of the first, the Lions, I think, would be all over that with Mitchell. But curious to see how these corners come off the board. There's a lot of good ones. There's some like Mitchell that are kind of rising up. We'll talk about some other guys that weren't like first-round names, but we'll get to them. Roman Wilson was, and his name is misspelled. The graphics guy messing up. Apologize for that. Roman Wilson was a big-time receiver during practices during the whole week. Maybe the best one because he was consistent, showing out every day. mainly with his hands, and the hands were there throughout his career too. I think he had one drop this year, which was big. Seems like a safe receiver to draft. Like, he's going to get open. Is he going to fly past guys? No. He's going to get open. He's going to catch the ball. He's pretty solid. Like, I think hands are maybe elites in terms of prospects. Everything else, like, he's not really missing everything, but is he elite in any of those categories? No. So I think it's like a safer pick. Maybe it was like a 4th round pick before. Could be a day 2 guy. I think you got to put the Chargers up there with some veteran receivers. What do they do with Keenan Allen? And then Harbaugh being there. The Bears, I think they'll be looking for a receiver kind of, around there, round 3, round 4. So that made sense. The Ravens, teams that need receivers but also can draft them around that range. Teams like the Titans, the Panthers could be taking one early, but they might be taking multiple. I can see them in Sean Payton's offense, the Broncos. I mean, you can list several teams. The guys that we have going around round 3, 4, you can list the whole NFL, all NFL teams, really. But I thought he was probably the most consistent overall best receiver. Is he the best receiver in terms of like your big board when it comes to the draft? No. But that was there. But I thought consistently the best receiver out there during the week. So Roman Wilson, again, safer pick, one to watch. Jarvis Brownlee, we're talking about some more corners here. He was really good throughout the week. Really sticky in coverage. Some of these guys showing they can play man coverage, not just zone. But yeah, wasn't being talked about a whole lot. Was he around 4 or 5? I think how good he was and how of a lockdown corner he was. He can get his hands on the ball as well. I think he can go in round 3. Some teams that stand out. Again, you can list several teams, but those are the teams that really stood out to me if I had to pick 6 when it comes to looking for a corner around that range and maybe could use a physical corner like Jarvis Brownlee. But really stood out. I thought he stood out in the game as well, not just the practice, mainly the practices, but was really solid. Then Cam Hart, another corner. Really good outing in the beginning of the game as well, coming up and tackling, being really physical. But you see him in one-on-ones throughout the week. One-on-ones are so hard for corners. But I think I talked about in that video going into the Senior Bowl, like look at his season for Notre Dame. When you think Notre Dame, you think, yeah, they got a pretty good defense. If you think, what's the number 1 player you think about with that defense? It's a corner. It's not Cam Hart. It's Benjamin Morrison. Who's not even eligible for the draft yet. He's kind of known as a future first-round pick. Next year, he locked down Marvin Harrison Jr., but it kind of makes you forget about Cam Hart and what went on during the year. Teams, when they play Notre Dame, when they threw the ball, they targeted Benjamin Morrison. They stayed away from Cam Hart. He was locked down in coverage, so there's a reason for that. He's physical. He's sticky in coverage. He's got the length as well, and he showed out Senior Bowl. I don't think we saw a ton of snaps in the game, but in practice and in the game, early in the game, he was kind of making a statement. So top 75 pick before. I think he's locked in as a top 50 pick. He should be a 2nd round pick there. And maybe some corners there's a lot that are making their way up. Maybe some start to slide. Could he end up hopping somebody that maybe got some love in the end of the 1st round in mock draft? It's a possibility, but again, I think it's another safe pick. I think you know what you're going to get from him. Is he going to be an elite corner in the NFL? Yeah, I guess he has a shot, but probably not. But I think he's going to be a really solid corner for a long time. So I think it's a really safe and a good pick and a good player you can get. So some teams that kind of popped in my mind there, but with these corners, especially around that range, you can list like half the league at least. So those are teams that just kind of came to mind first. But we talk about the tackles making some money this week, and I think the corners as well really stood out. Braden Fisk, I guess the interior defensive lineman too, but Florida State's defensive lineman, transferred there last year from Western Michigan, was a standout there as well. Just so explosive. We saw it all week. He actually switched teams. They put him on a different depth. That was interesting on game day. And we saw him early in the game just exploding off the ball. He had a tackle for loss right away, but the way he just explodes off the ball, I love that when it comes to defensive line, whether it's interior, exterior. Top 64 pick. He probably wasn't being talked about enough, but now top 40 pick. I almost said top 32. We don't want to force too many guys in the end of the 1st round, but I do think he could go late 1. I do think that the Cardinals have a couple picks in the 1st round. They'll pick again early in the 2nd. I think the Chiefs would like him. What if they lose Chris Jones? They could definitely pick him in the end of the 1st round. Chargers looking for an interior, Cowboys. Bengals. Texans, I think DeMeco Ryans would like him. I really liked him in Eberflus's scheme for the Bears. I think the sweet spot would be early second, which they were supposed to have. Obviously, they traded that to the Commanders. So that I first team I actually thought of was the Bears. I'm like, I try to find teams like that need a scheme fit, need, and then like right around the range where they're picking. I thought that's kind of how I come up with the teams sometimes, but kind of teams that come to mind. Next, we got Michael Hall, another defensive lineman, Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State. Yeah, he really showed up in the first couple days of practice, first 2 days. I like the athleticism, like the quickness, like the quick, jolts off the line. Showed in one-on-one, showed some nasty spin moves, just went to work, high motor guy. So he really impressed me a lot, just more so, again, with the twitchiness, the explosiveness. So maybe a top 100 pick before the Senior Bowl. I think it'd be a top 64 pick. Yeah, the Bears kind of looking for more athletic defensive lineman to pair in there with like Andrew Billings. They drafted a couple last year, but could they get him like third round, move up late second? Yeah, some similar teams we talked about that I think will be looking for a type of guy like an interior defensive lineman like this. But yeah, I always like to throw the potential landing spots in there. It's really not the focus of this video. I know people like that, but it's more who stood out to me, what type of player they are, what range they can go in, what range were they going to go in, where they could go in now. So that's mainly the main focus there. And then next, about Spencer Rattler. I mean, the quarterbacks throughout the week weren't super impressive. I thought Rattler, wasn't outstanding throughout the week, but I thought he handled himself pretty well. I keep hearing things that he's a little more mature now. You can hear him talk. He understands, he wished he did, was a little bit better in that category, I guess, in the past. So that's good. Because you don't want that attitude that he kind of had when he was younger, but maybe that's still in there. But you do want that competitive, confident guy. But I thought he got better as the week went on. I was pretty disappointed with the quarterbacks in general throughout the week. We'll talk about a couple other quarterbacks. One we won't talk about in this video, I guess I'll mention now, Bo Nix. Yeah, he missed some throws throughout the week. It was a little disappointing because it was starting to get some buzz. He had a good touchdown pass. I thought it was a smart touchdown pass, kind of where the ball needed to be. He had to improvise a little bit. That was good. But Rattler, he ended up winning MVP of the game. He had a solid first drive. I think he's going to have a better NFL career if he gets the opportunity than he played in college. South Carolina was kind of up and down, flashy moments here, but there were some bad moments. Holding on the ball a little too long. He has that flashy play down. Same with Oklahoma. Had those wow plays like tight window or just a bullet of a throw down the field or cross body, but then they have the bad plays on the routine ones. End up losing his job, but again, he lost his job to a guy that's going to be the first overall pick most likely. So, mainly round 5 was probably talked about before. I think could go as early as round 3, probably round 4. And then some teams that stood out could be looking for a backup quarterback or the quarterback of the future while they don't have the opportunity to take one in the first or maybe second round. Those are some teams that would stand out. Really liking with the 49ers, behind a guy like Brock Purdy. That was one that really stood out. For Spencer Rattler, who won the MVP of the Seniors Bowl. That sounded funny. Let me get rid of myself. I'm blocking it. A lot of other guys, which really want to highlight. So many. I mean, so many we left off this too. We're going to talk about more guys after this. But Lad McConkey, which expected to go out there and do his thing. He had a one-handed catch during the game, but he was really solid, get separation, making plays throughout the week of practice. Ricky Pearsall from Florida, really consistent week. I thought he was good where he stood out was as a separator. The double moves in and out of his break. So he stood out. I think it's another safe pick in the mid rounds. Malachi Corley getting a lot of buzz, again, after the catch type guy from Western Kentucky. He more so stock up just based on what you're hearing from people within the league at the Senior Bowl and how much talk they were giving him. And he was voted the best receiver there by his teammates. Christian Haynes was really good from UConn. Could be a plug-and-play guy at guard. Sometimes people find starters, in round 3, day 1 starters, and that it could be a guy like that. Maybe wasn't talked about a whole lot, but could he go early round 3? I could see it. Christian Jones, big body tackle from Texas, had a really good week. And he's definitely a guy that helped his stock. Could go. Where could he go? Round 3, perhaps, and a teammate, defensive tackle. Byron Murphy kind of getting the talk of that duo, but Devondre Sweat, another, physical, bigger body defensive tackle. Could he go in round 2? Austin Brooks, I was kind of talking about a little bit, hyping up a little bit from Kansas. He had a really good year. He showed out at the Senior Bowl as well. He had a really good tape. I was surprised he wasn't being talked about, a ton, before the Senior Bowl. Cedric Gray, I thought the linebacker from UNC, I thought he stood out in the game. Seemed like he was everywhere. And then Bertrand from Notre Dame, he was voted the best linebacker on his team throughout the week of practice. And then I thought he stood out in the game as well, was kind of everywhere. He's a smart linebacker, pretty good in coverage, but I thought he was flying in the backfield. Amani Bailey was the guy that stood out in the game, running back from TCU. Right off the bat, they gave him the ball like 4 or 5 times in a row. He was seeing the hole, hitting the hole. So I thought maybe he was one of the better players. I thought he could have won the MVP of the game. And then Shao Smith-Wade was getting his hands on the ball like crazy during the game. You heard his name like crazy, so that's another corner we can maybe look more into because he had a pretty good game. And then some other guys, Michael Penix is a tough one. You definitely got to talk about him. I put stock neutral, but yeah, his stock was up throughout the year, and then the national championship game, he didn't play well against better competition, but mainly he was limping around all game. There was no major injuries, but multiple injuries, and that was kind of his knock, his durability issues because of the past injuries. So he did not help himself that game because he didn't play great, but mainly because he's kind of proving maybe the doubters right when it comes to durability. Like teams are going to go, God, can we really take this guy here? Because it's becoming evident. So he needed to come in here and have a good week. And he was up and down. He was all right. I guess throughout most the practices in terms of arm talent, he probably looked like the best one. But then the game comes along and he decides he's not going to play because he has 99.99% chances because he doesn't want to risk injury. And that's not a great look for him because he's a guy that he's basically going along with it. Like, I got injury concern. I guess I got beat up. And it's understandable. It's understandable because you did get beat up a little bit in that game, but it doesn't go. So I'm not going to knock him. I'm not saying he's scared, anything like that. But it doesn't help with the narrative on him and why maybe his stock has actually been falling since the end of the year. So it's actually neutral. It's right around what we were saying after the national championship game, and he's probably not going to go in the first round. He's probably going to be a second-round pick because he has the arm talent. Sam Hartman was brutal, I thought. First day, he was actually decent at practice. The rest of the week of practice, brutal. The game was brutal. He actually looks like a better runner than passer, and he's not like the greatest runner in the world. So he underthrows a lot. Sometimes it looks pretty, like the setup looks pretty, but man, a year ago you probably thought maybe a 4th-round pick, 5th-round pick. Now I don't think he gets drafted. Joe Milton, we knew about how strong his arm was, but he had to put everything else together. I don't think he did that. Struggled through a week of practice. He just has that crazy arm that you go, ooh, like and you love to work with that, but he continuously showed, Michigan, Tennessee, Senior Bowl shows that he's not the smartest passer, he's not the most accurate guy. He looks to go deep too often. We even saw that on turnovers in the game. We saw it early on where he was insisting on going deep, got outside the pocket to buy himself more time, wanted to go deep, guy wasn't open, so I can't throw it, let me take a sack. You're outside the pocket, throw the ball away. So I don't love things like that. Tez Walker was a big name from UNC. I never had him in the first round, but there was a lot of people talking about him in the first round. I didn't see that, but I knew he was talented, obviously, and he still is talented. And he did have some good moments here. Like, there was some little parts of practice where it's like, hey, there's Tez Walker. And in the game, was a great release and, shaking the guy off, and there's Tez Walker. But majority of the time, just kind of disappointed. I thought, again, he's quick twitched off the line, but like long speed, I thought he had much better. We'll see what he runs, but, the game speed, I thought he's a little faster, a little more of a separator. Had some drops, tracking the ball a little iffy. So I thought, again, great player still. Great player. Probably goes on day 2 still. But the people that had him in the first round, he definitely dropped from there. Like, I'm thinking like late second at the earliest, honestly. I had him like around that second. So could be late third from there. So, still a good player. Didn't drop tremendous, like didn't kill himself with this. But stock definitely down. And then Kalen King going into the year was like a first-round corner. Looks legit. Could argue a better prospect than Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State. But did not help himself during the year, but it was still like, yeah, could go late first, early second. but did not have a good outing during practice throughout the week. Just kind of getting lost and not being able to track the ball, spot the ball. I think that's kind of instincts, like knowing where the ball will be, just timing, just with that many reps in your career, knowing receivers' body language. Like, he's off in that category, which that's instincts. I think you either got it or you don't. So, man, that's tough, because I thought in 2022, I'm like, this guy's a future top 15 pick. So I guess the talent's still in there. He has that going for him a little bit. But that was rough. Wasn't expecting that. So there you have it. So a lot of guys, and there's a lot of guys that stood out that I didn't even talk about. I mean, you have to stop at some point. But these are the main guys like that really changed their stock. There's other guys that look good, but did they really change their stock? We did have one neutral in here, but because it's a really hot topic, a little popular name at Michael Penix Jr., who has talent. Just there's some doubts, and we've talked about that. But there you have it. There's probably other guys you guys want to talk about. Where you will let me hear it in the comments. Always talk with you guys on Twitter. There's a link pinned in the comments for that. And anything else you're looking for. We have draft content. We're going to start working on an updated mock draft post Senior Bowl here. We have free agency, trade, cuts, playoffs, Super Bowl, all that coverage. So join us. Help us get to 100K. We much, much appreciate it. We're almost there. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.